Well, welcome to our webinar. This is Lisa Anderson, president of Inland Empire. Now we've converted into ASCM-Inland Empire, so that's the Association for Supply Chain Management, still based on the APICS certifications and APICS principles. So we are very excited to be offering a webinar series, Emerging with Supply Chain Strength. And this month we have Michelle Nash-Hoff, who's going to be talking about reshoring and the resurgence of manufacturing. And this webinar series is also sponsored by my firm, LMA Consulting Group. So thank you to LMA Consulting Group as well. And definitely to APICS Inland Empire, ASCM Inland Empire for hosting us. So today we have Michelle Nash-Hoff. I'm going to introduce Michelle and then turn it over to her. Michelle is founder and president of Electrofab Sales, a sales agency specializing in helping manufacturers select the right processes for their products since 1985. Michelle is currently a director on the board of American Jobs Alliance and the board of the San Diego Inventors Forum. She was chair of the California chapter of the Coalition for Prosperous America for many, many years as well. Michelle has written several books and is definitely an expert in manufacturing and reshoring. And she's going to share her wealth of knowledge with us today. She's the author of 3 books. You might want to check them out on Amazon or wherever they're sold, which I'm sure she will tell us. The latest being Rebuild Manufacturing, The Key to American Prosperity, which is a sequel to the 2012 edition of Can American Manufacturing Be Saved? Why We Should and How We Can. And she's also been a blogger for the HuffPost, Industry Week, and other news lines, and currently for blogs throughout. So she is very much a leading expert on this topic. And as I know our chapter is really excited to see the strength of manufacturing, and we're looking forward to hearing Michelle tell us all about it. So with that said, Michelle, we'll turn it over to you. If you have questions, please put them in the chat box or in the Q&A, and I will ask Michelle as we go along. And with that said, Michelle, we'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Well, it's a pleasure to be doing this presentation this morning. I love to talk on this subject. I could talk for hours, but we'll keep it within a reasonable time limit. So why do we need to rebuild manufacturing and have a We know what happened from 2010 to 2000 to 2010. We lost 5.8 million manufacturing jobs and 77,000 manufacturing firms closed. Well, where did these jobs go? Well, according to the U.S. Department of Commerce, the U.S. multinational corporations cut their workforce in the U.S. by 2.9 million during the 2000s, while increasing their employment overseas by 2.4 million. So about half went overseas. So that meant that we lost a lot of manufacturing jobs showing on this chart. I mean, we actually were back in like 1979, 80, we're at the peak. So we really did lose a lot of jobs. And this affected the trade balance because when we're not manufacturing as much and exporting and we're importing, it reverses the trade balance. So we went into a deep dive for a recession that was for losing, our trade balance going down to the negative. The last year, we had a positive balance was like 1979. So it has come up a little bit since then, but it's been up and down in the last 11 years now. And our top 10 trade deficit countries are China, Mexico, Japan, Germany, Ireland, Vietnam, Italy, India, South Korea, and Malaysia. But 1979 was the last year we had a positive trade balance. In 2020, the trade balance deficit was 678.7 billion, and 42% of this trade deficit was with China. So this affected jobs. The U.S. Private Job Sector Quality Index that began in 2019 assessed job quality in the United States, and it's measuring desirable higher paying jobs versus lower wage, lower hour jobs. And the size and composition of the U.S. labor force has changed substantially over the past quarter century, but the percentage has remained flat in the low percentile since 2009. So here's the job quality index. It's actually being published monthly now. So this is the March. They haven't released the April report yet. I'm on the list to get this. So the workers' real incomes have really stagnated in the last 10 years. And so we can be making maybe more money in the dollars that we're getting on our paychecks, but the purchasing power has hardly budged in many years. So as a result, we have a shrinking middle class. So we've dropped by about 10% from 1970 to 2018.
Wow, that's significant.
Yes. So wages only increased a whole 61% in 34 years. That's only just just enough to keep up with inflation, 1.8% per year. And that's because the hourly wage nationwide is $11.31 an hour. That produces an average income of $22,620 a year. Well, that's not even, that's nowhere in the middle class, especially in Southern California. Whereas manufacturing jobs pay an average annual base pay of about nearly $48,000, according to the latest statistics that I got from Glassdoor. But certain industries pay a lot more, like the automotive industry. You can be earning as much as $70,000 a year in the automotive industry. So what can we do? Why did we lose so many jobs? What's the big reason? Well, first, NAFTA benefited our trading partners more than ourselves and began the process of outsourcing jobs to Mexico. Then in 2000, we granted China most favored nation status and allowed them to join into the World Trade Organization, which started the ball rolling to massive outsourcing of manufacturing to China. And then as part of being part of the World Trade Organization, we ended tariffs on imports from our trading partner countries. And then the other factor is that tax policies have favored multinational global corporations and allowed them to shift their profits to other countries, which encouraged them to outsource manufacturing jobs to other countries. So my first book I wrote came out in 2009, and I really believed that we needed to save American manufacturing because we were at the depths of the recession and losing all these jobs and companies. So in the last 10 years, we actually saved American manufacturing. And some of the factors that contributed to this, that wages did rise about 15% year over year in China. Of course, they started so low that they're still way below ours. Transportation costs rose significantly. We had peaks and valleys, but we're in a current peak again. Then the Trump administration started tariffs on Chinese goods, which really helped accelerate, reshoring. And then Harry Mosier founded the Reshoring Initiative in 2010. So starting the total cost of ownership analysis to return manufacturing to America, that had effect. Additive manufacturing has benefited too, because fewer startup companies needed to go to China to make their new products because they could start off getting parts made by additive manufacturing, and then they were able to, get enough money to be able to afford to get started in manufacturing here in the US. And there's us being part of the San Diego Inventors Forum, when I was invited to join in 2009 after my book was published, We changed the whole purpose of the San Diego Inventors Forum, where before it had been the focus to help companies go to China to manufacture the new products. The board made a decision to totally focus on helping companies make products in the US. And every year at the San Diego Inventors Forum, I gave a presentation sort of called Manufacturing 101, how to select the right processes and sources for your new products here in the United States. Another factor that's been beneficial for returning manufacturing has been automation, robotics, and utilization of the industrial Internet of Things. And then lean transformation, making companies more competitive, and also just going through the whole lean transformation, because in actuality, offshoring is contrary to the whole principles of lean manufacturing, where you're supposed to be reducing waste and reducing waiting time, etc. So if people had really followed the principles of lean, they never would have gone offshore to the extent that they did. So what are the key competitive requirements for companies to be successful in the United States and be able to manufacture in the US? Well, we need favorable corporate tax rates. We need regulations that are not overly costly and burdensome. We need cheap available energy. We need a competitive dollar. We need access to capital for R&D and expansion, and we need a reliable supply of skilled workers. We didn't have all those things available during the last 20 years. What can we do to balance trade for economic growth? Well, we need to renegotiate trade agreements so that they're more favorable to our country. We need to eliminate trade cheating from transshipping. Transshipping is where a product is maybe made in China and they ship it to Korea, South Korea, and then it's shipped from South Korea as if it's a South Korean product instead of a Chinese product. We need to continue and expand tariffs on Chinese goods. We need to defend industries that are critical to national security, the health of our citizens, and economic growth. And we need to strengthen Buy American requirements for government procurement and establish a market access charge to the value of the dollar to balance trade. These are some of the recommendations of an organization I've been part of since 2011. In fact, when I was researching my book in 2009, I checked out every kind of trade organization or organization that a manufacturer would belong to, and I discovered that the U.S. Chamber and the National Association of Manufacturers had really had the control of their boards and their philosophies and what they were lobbying for taken over by the multinational global corporations. So everything that they lobbied for would be benefiting the multinational corporations to the detriment of American-only small businesses. And of course, American manufacturers are mostly small businesses. In fact, nationwide, it's over 90% that are in the small business category. I'm sorry for my phone ringing, but it'll stop in a minute. And so we do, okay. So President Trump changed the picture to improve things for American manufacturers. The first thing he did was withdrew from the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the Paris Climate Accord. The tax rate was lowered by Congress to a flat tax of 21%. He renegotiated NAFTA and the Korea Free Trade Agreement. He negotiated a bilateral trade agreement with China, United Kingdom, and Japan. He increased enforcement of current agreements to reduce trade cheating. He enforced penalties on transshipping of steel and aluminum, established tariffs on Chinese steel, aluminum, solar panels, and other goods such as washing machines. And he reformed regulation policies and eliminated onerous regulations. So this really helped bring back manufacturing to the United States with having these things changed.
Michelle, what was the, you said you brought down the taxes to 21%. How does that stand versus like, most of the other countries that we compete with manufacturing wise?
Well, prior to that, we had the highest effective corporate tax rate in the world after Japan reduced their tax rate about 6 years ago. So,
Well, that's good.
yeah, so of course, the multinational corporations were able to shift their profits to other countries, but it hurt the companies that were only American-owned companies that only had their one plant or multiple plants within the United States and not, divisions in other parts of the world. So really, the American small businesses took the brunt of the high tax rates.
I see.
So
now at least at the moment they're at 21%. Does that put us like in the middle, or at least we're not the highest anymore?
No, we're in the competitive range. There are some that are down in the teens, like Ireland. So and the lowest tax rate is Ireland, and it's only like at 13% corporate tax rate.
Wow, that's not
But there's only a half a dozen countries that are below 20%.
okay. So most of them are like around 20%.
In the 20s is the average worldwide.
How about China? Do you know what that is?
I don't know.
Okay, it's fine.
Right.
I just want,
because there's so many companies in China are government owned. So
yeah, that's true. Actually, whether they are or aren't, they probably are. So
exactly.
Okay, got it.
Right. Right. So what can we do to rebuild manufacturing as a whole? Well, we actually need to have a national manufacturing strategy to improve the business climate. And of course, return manufacturing through reshoring, transform companies through lean training, utilize the Industry 4.0 technologies and methods, and we need to educate youth on career opportunities to replace retiring baby boomers, because right now, actually for several years now, there's been a continuous availability of skilled jobs that are not being filled because we don't have enough people trained in the skills needed for manufacturing. And of course, this is something, as a regular reader of my blog, you've seen many articles on that topic that I've written over the last several years. So
Absolutely.
So why do we need a manufacturing strategy? Well, we need one now, especially to counteract, to go against China's Made in China 2025 plan. It spells out how they plan to dominate the world of manufacturing in the future. And of course, they have an even more extensive plan to actually dominate be the world superpower of the 21st century by 2049 in every area that you consider being a superpower. We have 38 manufacturing industries that are declining in terms of companies and employment. We need to prevent the loss of high value added manufacturing sectors like advanced technology industries. Right now, we have a situation where there are no longer certain components made in the US at all by any company. And that's where we're in the biggest danger of having our components becoming only from China.
That is really worrisome. I mean, is there anything that's happening that will help to prevent that, or anything that we can be doing? Because that does seem very concerning.
Yes, it is very concerning because, there's board level components that we can't get anywhere but China. So that is a problem. But last year's, COVID, the pandemic, and the lack of being able to get our health care and personal protective equipment supplies has woke up members of Congress.
That's true, I think. That's one advantage of that happening.
It was the only advantage of happening, is people realize we're dependent on China. when, there was a book that came out at the end of 2019, very timely, by Rosemary Gibbons. It's called China RX, and she was outlining what had happened to the whole pharmaceutical and medical industry, and how everything, 80% of our pharmaceutical ingredients come from China. So she's now been very popular speaking to different congressional committees in Washington. So she's a member of the Coalition for a Prosperous America, like I am.
Oh,
so we need to encourage manufacturers to invest in the US. So the Reshoring Initiative, as I mentioned, was founded by Harry Mosier in 2010. And his goal was to return manufacturing to the US. At the time, he was the chairman of GF Agi Charmy, a large equipment company. And his company sort of funded him to start this reshoring initiative. He had, come up with a worksheet calculator to calculate the hidden costs of doing business offshore. And his objective was to change the mindset from offshore is cheaper to local reduces the cost of ownership, and to train OEMs on why to source local and how to use a TCO calculator, and suppliers on how to sell local sourcing to encourage production near the customer. Well, my book had just come out in 2009 and I started blogging. Well, I wrote a blog article in August of 2010 on why it was important to understand total cost of ownership. And I was using the worksheets from the American Mold Builders Association and the National Tooling Machining Association. And Harry contacted me after that article and said I was writing about what he had just started. So he trained me in how to use his worksheet calculator and authorized me to be a substitute speaker for him, like his West Coast speaker. And so at the time, we were actually emailing the worksheet calculator people after we gave presentations, but we didn't have the ability to capture any data. So within a year, Harry changed it where you had to use the calculator on his website. And that way he would be able to follow up and see if you actually used it, if you brought back jobs, and what industries the companies were in, and how many jobs were created, and so forth. So since 2011, he's been able to capture this data, because you can go to his website, reshorenow.org, and use the worksheet calculator, and it'll come up with a report that you can then use to see how you could reshore. So you can put in a specific part or a product, and all the different components. You can do it by component, you can do it by product. So it really works. So because purchase price variance or even landed costs don't capture all the costs that are involved in total cost of ownership. You're definitely losing anywhere from 13% to 23% of the total cost. So in 2011, a very timely report came out from the Boston Consulting Group, and they had identified 7 industries that were at the tipping point of returning to the US: transportation goods, electrical equipment and appliances, furniture, fabricated metal products, plastics and rubber components, computer electronics, and machinery. And these sectors account for 70% of US imports and $2 trillion in US consumption. Well, many people ridiculed the article, thought it was totally bogus and wasn't going to happen. Well, now 10 years later, of data that Harry Mosier has captured, these 7 industries are in the top 10 of what has reshored to the United States, and the number of jobs that have been created by this reshoring. So their prediction came true, thank goodness. So here's an example of, the chart you would get, from doing a TCO comparison, where you have a particular product that right now, if in China, you could get for around $70, and compared to about just under 100 here in the US for the total cost. But over a period of time, you can get down to where you are matching the China price. So this shows you how to do that. So how large are the hidden costs? There's been some recent studies just in the last year that have identified it. There was a study for 6 United Kingdom manufacturers, and they found out that the size of the hidden cost was actually 25 to 50%, which and the European auto industry did a study just on on boards, and they've realized that the hidden costs were 15%. Parker Dewhurst did a study, and their conclusion was there was 24% of hidden costs. Booz and Company did a report, and they came up with 17.5%. And Professor John Gray of Ohio State University said that more price difference in the case studies, more than price. So the Reshoring Initiative's results over the last 10 years have been between 15 and 25% of hidden costs are not captured unless you do a total cost of ownership analysis.
And what are some of the key ones that are hidden?
Intellectual property theft is a major one. Quality, reworking, inventory, because you have to have a safety stock and inventory costs. There's a cost of the inventory itself, plus the cost of space to store it. And then you have product warranties. So there's a lot of different transportation costs. There's communication. The ease of the transition and the communication is not as easy because you're dealing with people where English is in their first language. Even though we have, what we're doing now, Zoom meetings and online and all that, it's still not the same when you're dealing with people who are not thinking in your same language. So that's the problems. The cost of the transition and the cost of management, the transition always exceeds what you estimate. That's another factor. So here's the top reasons for companies reshoring: quality, rework, warranty, freight costs, total cost, delivery, inventory costs, rising wages, supply chain interruption, natural disaster. Remember the earthquake in China that caused, big disruption. This was several years ago. And then, of course, we had the Japanese, tsunami, and then Fukushima event. So and even now, green considerations. There's companies that that want to be classified as a green company. So that doesn't go with manufacturing in China. So
very true, actually.
That's right. Oh yeah, I know. In my first book, I actually had a chapter on the effects of industrialization on China and India, and I did extensive research on their environment, air quality, water quality, etc. And it was so horrific. I was just sick to heart when I got done with the chapter, thinking of what the people of China and India were having to endure from the industry that had no environmental regulations to protect their air and water, and 80% of their water was polluted. And of course, we've seen when the Olympics have been held in China, the pollution, we saw that. So we're starting to restore balance now from the last 10 years of efforts of the Reshoring Initiative. And in addition, there's another factor, foreign direct investment, because foreign companies have realized there's an advantage to being near their largest market. And the US is the largest consumer market in the world. So foreign direct investment is investment by foreign companies to build plants in the US, to manufacture in the US, to be closer to their customer. So this has really helped also. In fact, when I had the pleasure of traveling around the country for 4 years when I was writing for Industry Week, and I would get to go to different cities and regions and tour manufacturing plants and write about them. And in particular, North and South Carolina had an extensive number of European companies that had set up plants in the United States to take advantage of being closer to their customer. There were, a very large BMW plant. So those are the kinds of things that have been going on with regards to foreign direct investment. Producing, to be able to produce your products near your consumer, your customer. And then, of course, nearshoring to Mexico or Canada has become also more popular, especially to Mexico, because the cost of labor in Mexico is now as competitive as China. So you can manufacture in Mexico and be closer to your customer and
I
take
heard that
advantage.
it's like even less. Is that true?
In some, well, it depends on what you're comparing it to in China. It's definitely less than the coastal area. There now is differences in wages in China depending on how close you are to the coast. So it's less expensive inland China and more expensive wages closer to the coast. So yes, Mexico can be cheaper than, China coastal areas and competitive with their inland areas. And because then you've got transportation, from the inland part of China to the coast before it gets shipped to the US. So that's a factor too. So here's what the growth looks like since the Reshoring Initiative started. So we can see that it's been about 900,000 jobs by the end of 2019. I don't have the data yet for 2020. Harry has not released his report that he released in December of 2020 had the 2019 data. So the data is coming out pretty much about a year later. So it's lagging. But his projection is that it will be at 1 million by his next report. So, of course, we lost 5.8 million, so we still have a long way to go.
Yeah, but it is a milestone.
Yes, it is a milestone, right? So here are some of the reshores that have reshored products in the last 10 years. General Electric was actually the first company that got written about a lot because they reshored their water heater back to their appliance park, Kentucky, and they've reshored a lot. And Whammo's interesting. They make the hula hoop. Think of the hula hoop, a big, large, extruded plastic tube. What's in the middle? Air. So it was expensive to ship. So they brought the manufacturing of the hula hoop back to the United States. Interesting reason, isn't it? So
yeah, now, I used to work in an industry where we made adult incontinence products. They were very fluffy and light, but they took up a lot of space. Not as bad as the hula hoop, but same concept. I mean, it's just cost prohibitive freight wise.
Yes, exactly. Right. So I've got some specific examples here. I selected ones that came back to California, because if you can come back to California to manufacture something, you can come back anywhere because we are one of the more expensive states to do business. So diving equipment, Diving Unlimited, returned manufacturing from China to San Diego. And the reasons were quality and proximity to customers. Think of what a large industry or large consumer base there is for people that are buying diving equipment in San Diego and on the West Coast, let's face it. And also, diving equipment can, result in loss of life if it isn't working. So quality is definitely a big reason to want to have your product made in the US. If your product can be, life-threatening if it doesn't work. So, but here's a good one. Plastic tableware. Calibo, reshored from China to Union City, California, hired 20 new employees.
That's surprising, actually.
Yes. Improved quality. Customers said they wanted the USA brand, and it gave them the ability to react quickly and provide just-in-time manufacturing. So if you can bring back plastic tableware, I think you could find a way to bring back just about anything. Karen Kane, women's apparel. It's thrilling to see some women's apparel coming back. They came back from China to Los Angeles. Reasons were quality control, rising labor and duty costs in China, and they have been able to be a more nimble company to better capitalize on a fashion trend. And they have more sophisticated manufacturing techniques now for production, so it's no longer as prohibitively expensive as it once was when they went to China. So back into the garment district of Los Angeles, hurrah. And Lily Cup, reshored manufacturing from Asia to Chino in 2013. They added employees once their 300,000 square foot facility was completed. And their reasons were to shorten lead time, reduce shipping costs, proximity to increase customer demand, and patriotism, wanting to be a made in the USA company. Quality and automation, utilizing automation also made it possible. So in addition, there's this program that actually,
it's always at the wrong time. Don't worry.
I can tell you, I go days without getting a phone call. Days. This is really interesting.
It's typical.
Yes, it is typical. So in 2014, Walmart pledged to increase their Made in USA purchases, $250 billion over 10 years, and the goal was to create 300 manufacturing jobs by the end of that 10 years. What was their reason for doing this? It wasn't out of the goodness of their heart. It was because they were having competition from Dollar General, Dollar Tree, 99-cent stores. So they needed a reason to bring consumers back into their store to pay, $2 or $3 for what they could buy at a dollar store for $1. So they actually have done it. They selected several categories of products that they were going to start with. Textiles was one of the first ones. Sporting goods was one of the first ones. Well, it was so successful that they just, in March of this year, they just pledged to buy an additional $350 billion in the next 10 years. So they're increasing buying US manufactured goods. They're replacing products that they were buying from China to be made in USA. And this has been real. In fact, I've been told now that the only way to get a new product into a Walmart store is to have it be a made in USA product. So that's the good news. So there are definitely societal benefits to restoring manufacturing to the US and reducing our trade deficit. We could increase manufacturing by about 40%, which would create 5 million jobs. We would cut the US budget deficit. We would be able to have products for the defense of our country. We would restore the middle class and small manufacturing enterprises, strengthen skilled workforce recruitment, provide careers for ex-retail employees, reduce global pollution and minimize wasteful transportation. And it would increase the capital investment by about 20% for 20 years because of buying new manufacturing equipment and building new plants. And it would allow growth in productivity and manufacturing employment. The interesting thing that this provide careers for ex-retail employees is now become more important after the pandemic, because we've seen how devastating the pandemic and shutdowns nationwide were to small businesses, small retail stores, as well as large chains. I mean, we now no longer have a Sears store in San Diego County. And the one that was here in Hemet closed last year also. So the big box stores took a big hit from the pandemic, and people buying everything they could on Amazon or other online, retail websites. So that's an important thing. We can train, we have all these unfilled manufacturing jobs, so we can retrain the people to provide them with manufacturing skills to get higher paying jobs. So the COVID-19 did wake people up because we couldn't get supplies. So as a result, we saw that the global supply chain failed. We were about 70 to 95% import dependent, depending on the products, primarily from China. And as a result, 70 of 195 countries have restricted, their exports because they needed them themselves. And it was impossible to scale up here fast enough to provide the products we needed for the pandemic. So that woke people up. So here's just a recap of some of the effect of the tariffs and COVID. We now have a greater intellectual appreciation of the trade deficit. This is at the high level. We're talking government, administration people, as well as elected officials. And the imports from China definitely declined from the tariffs. And the COVID, we realized that we had lack of critical health products. Our economy was ravaged, businesses failed, massive unemployment. And this resulted in a commitment to reverse our dependencies on the part of elected officials and Congress. And there were a number of bills introduced to reduce our dependence on China and increase made in USA. So these are all the bills that were introduced by the senators. Now, they were introduced, in the fall. So we have a new Congress, so they're going to have to be reintroduced. And I'm on the Buy American Committee and the Supply Chain Committee for the Coalition for Prosperous America. And we know about what's going on in Congress because of the work of our committees and our government relations director. So we know that all of those bills that were introduced last fall will be reintroduced this year with great hopes for being passed. There's also talk of setting up some kind of a funding source for initiating the manufacture of critical components in the US. It could be some kind of a version of, like the small business investment programs, SBIRs, TRs. So this kind of, there's now a study being done of what these critical components are to see what ones we could restart to make here in the United States. So here's some tailwinds that may help reshoring. The world markets for offshore suppliers has grown. So our domestic suppliers here in the US have less competition to supply to the US because these offshore countries now have a bigger world market. There is increased usage of the total cost of ownership worksheet. There's greater consumer interest in Made in America. And there's continued improvement in skilled workforce programs. And we have more environmental consciousness of the domestic supply chains, so that we have more companies that could be considered green. I mean, with our environmental regulations that we have for air quality and water, we are already, have companies that are producing things in a clean, environmentally safe way for our environment compared to China. So in fact, that's why it's foolish for us to rejoin the Paris Climate Accord, because China and India don't have to comply with it because they're still categorized as developing countries stupidly. So here's some trends.
We have one question here, sure. Michelle. I don't know. I figure I'll ask it now because it might relate to this part of it. Sarah's asking, what's your opinion on TIFs, tax increment financing, and the effect on local economies?
I'm sorry, but I am not at all familiar of tax increment financing. It's not something.
Okay, no problem. Well,
Right.
Sarah, if you actually, it's good to see you, Sarah. But if you explain it further, we might be able to answer more. So go ahead. No problem. Go ahead, Michelle.
Okay. Um, Last year, there are a number of websites now. There's MadeInAmerica.co. It's a website saw an 825% increase in consumer interest between March and April in Made in America products. The Made in America trade show, which is MadeInAmerica.com, reported that inquiries for American-made products went up 2,000% in 2020. And a Washington-based firm did a survey of over 1,000 adults, and 40% of Americans won't buy products from China. 55% don't think China can be trusted to follow through on its trade deal commitments to buy more US products. And 78% said they'd be willing to pay more for products if the company that made them moved manufacturing out of China. So that's the good news. Now, you mentioned that I blog for other organizations now. Well, for almost a year, 11 months now, I've been blogging for the MadeInAmericaMovement.com. They're sending out their blog articles as a bi-monthly newsletter, and they have a subscriber database that has grown dramatically. And the last time I looked, it was up to 565,000 people that are interested in Made in America products.
Interesting.
That is a big growth. So my audience for my blog articles has now dramatically increased. So the advantages for today's manufacturers for manufacturing supply chain are reshoring helps company with faster lead times. You have a 49 to 50% reduction. Delivery accuracy improves by 30 to 40%. Companies can respond swiftly to unforeseen disruptions, and you're able to address volatile demand, and you are able to be a more agile manufacturer by having a closer proximity to your market. And you can be more competitive by serving local markets while maintaining low costs. So using TCO, we can help the customer see the value by focusing on the profit impact, risk management, and strategic benefits. And we can, ask about products that are causing the customer problems like late deliveries, poor quality, intellectual property, theft, excess inventory, loss order, and travel costs. And then we need to overcome the corporate mandates to offshore. That's the biggest problem we have. In addition to that, purchasing agents, buyers and purchasing agents, many times are compensated or rewarded or have their employee, they're evaluated on their purchase price variance. How well they achieve on their purchase price variance. So it's hard to get a company to look into doing total cost of ownership if they're compensating their employees using purchase price variance. So that's the biggest obstacle we have, is getting purchasing departments and supply chain people to look at using total cost ownership, because it has to be a change of philosophy at the upper management level to be able to do total cost of ownership. And the other thing is, for 5 years, I was invited to be a speaker at the Lean Accounting conference. The last one was in Jacksonville, Florida. And we need more companies to become lean companies using lean accounting and not just being lean manufacturer in their manufacturing department. Because when you are doing lean accounting, it incorporates the philosophy of total cost of ownership, and you can do that total cost of ownership much easier when you have access to all the different information you get from doing lean accounting. So I was glad to get to be a speaker at that lean accounting conference to be able to, help them understand how they could incorporate the total cost of ownership analysis into their lean accounting programs. So the potential benefits will be reducing the trade deficit, which is, averaging 600 billion plus per year, adding 3 million manufacturing jobs for a total of 9 to 12 million jobs, because each manufacturing job creates 2 to 3 other jobs. We would reduce the unemployment below 4%, cut the US budget deficit by about 50%, have a 25% increase in manufacturing, and have an extra 25% annual equipment investment spread over 25 years. So what can companies do? My recommendations are: start on the journey to become a lean company, implement lean accounting, use the reshoring tools to return manufacturing to America, take advantage of help from the California Manufacturing Extension Partnership, which is CMTC, because they have been trained, they have a reshoring initiative project that they started last summer after I kicked it off with a presentation, and become active in organizations that promote rebuilding American manufacturing, such as the organization I'm part of, the Coalition for a Prosperous America. It's the only nonpartisan, a nonprofit organization focused on rebuilding manufacturing and creating more American jobs. It's not just manufacturers who are members, it's also American ranchers and farmers, and also the industrial labor councils, the AFL-CIO industrial labor councils that directly provide employees for manufacturing. What can you do as an individual? Well, don't feel that there's nothing you can do. Margaret Mead said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." Remember, our country was founded by a small group of people that did indeed change the world by forming the United States of America. So what can you do yourself? Keep up with industry trends and technology advances. Keep acquiring new technical skills. Take training in Lean Six Sigma if you haven't already. Support reshoring. Be a role model and mentor to youth, and encourage your children to pursue manufacturing careers.
Well, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say that ASCM and the Apex Inland Empire chapter, that's what we're all about. So please stay, keep in tune for our webinar series, and we are offering several certification programs that give you a lot of these technical skills and the ability to keep up with industry trends. So I think that's great, Michelle. I figured I'd throw that in there.
Oh yes, it fits perfectly.
We do have a couple of questions too, but you can keep going, or do you want me to ask?
We're done. I'll take questions.
Oh, okay. Well, great. Well, thank you very much.
This is how to get a hold of me if anybody wants to get a hold of me.
Excellent. Well, that's great, and we appreciate all you've done to promote American manufacturing. By all means, in our group, it's a hot topic of conversation. So Sarah explained further about TIFs. She said, with the TIF, a community incentivizes corporations to build a new factory in their community by refunding or diverting a portion of their taxes, which helps them finance the project. What she said she's observed in small towns in the Midwest is once the TIF has expired, the company will close down or move out their manufacturing. So that's what, now I don't remember her original question about it, but that's what she said.
Okay, yeah, and I when she explained it, I have read about it. I have seen it. It has been used by companies. Unfortunately, I didn't know the statistics on how many companies actually moved out of the town or the state after that was, the tax incentive had ended. So I'm not up to speed, but I am familiar with the program. I just wasn't familiar with the acronym for it, describing it. So there are, and that's one of the big, I think, tractions for, North and South Carolina, that they do have tax incentives for companies coming to their states. They also have programs to train manufacturers, so train employees for that company. So that is one of the big reasons the European companies are going to those states, because they can hire employees and have them trained for free.
Yeah, I'm seeing the same. I mean, companies need a way to have folks trained, and there's several ways to go about getting that done. But you're absolutely right. That's a key piece, as well as the tax incentive. So I guess, given Sarah, you bring up a really good point. It kind of concerns me if we go away from the corporate tax being more competitive with other nations. Like, I hope that the same thing doesn't happen, but that brings up a question, Michelle. I mean, I imagine part of the Reshoring Initiative is to try to keep the corporate tax competitive so that we don't have issues on that front.
Oh yeah, that's definitely one of the emphasis. There's actually a proposal for how to get multinationals to pay their fair share of taxes, so they will have less incentive to outsource manufacture, set up plants outside the United States, or do profit shifting. And it's called sales factor tax apportionment. And there are proposals to, we're soliciting support now to have a bill introduced that would establish this. And the way it would work is every country or every company that wants to sell in the United States, whether it's a U.S. company that has a plant, another country, or it's a foreign country, would have to pay taxes on the percentage of their sales that are in the U.S. So say they have $100 billion of sales worldwide, and 40 billion of those sales are in the United States. They would have to pay taxes on the profits from that $40 billion of sales. So that's the current proposal, to try and make it less enticing for companies to move manufacturing to another country, or to shift their profits. If you haven't read about how they do this, you need to search on the Starbucks model, because they shift their products to 4 different countries before they pay taxes.
Wow, interesting. Well, and what I'd say too, to answer your question, Sarah, is that I find that sad that that's happening, but I think that companies do pay attention to tax incentives. So from that point of view, hopefully we can work with political leaders to keep some of those in place. But I would also say that in some cases, if you get the opportunity with a tax incentive, and then you can implement lean programs, and you can develop a strong culture where people are working together to achieve excellence. Like, we have a company in the Inland Empire, I think it's actually called Made in the USA. Anyway, I'm gonna have to look up the name, but they've been a speaker in our APICS webinars, and they won an award from the Manufacturing Council of the Inland Empire in the past. And they're operating in California, which clearly has like the highest tax rates ever. And their whole point of starting this company in around, I don't know, like 2010, 2012, something like that, was to prove that it could be done, to bring products back from China and to be produced in the US. And they have been really successful, and they're growing like mad. So it's quite doable, and clearly they didn't have the incentives, but they are very much on the lean forefront. Like, how do you work with people, getting everybody to look at how to be effective, save money. I mean, they're all about their people. They do have some automation and robots, but it's like they believe that is working in conjunction with people, and actually the people are the more important piece. So anyway, I'd throw that out there, Sarah, as a way to succeed in that environment, but I'd also encourage folks to keep the tax incentives for manufacturers. But that's just my 2 cents. And we have one last question, Michelle, and then we'll wrap up here. Dr. Lewis is asking, he said, supply chains are increasingly being enabled by information technology, especially from a global perspective. Technical jobs from this area have been outsourced in the past few years, if not decades. What is in the pipeline to address this issue from a reshoring point of view?
That is a serious problem because we've outsourced a lot of our, software programming and technical services. Yes, that right now, nobody is really looking at that. Even the Coalition for a Prosperous America is not addressing that because they think these other things have to be done first before we can go down to that level of bringing back, technical skills. When we've certainly, unfortunately, learned during this pandemic that you can pretty much do just about anything from anywhere now with what we have. I mean, I think we're not ever going to go back to what it was before the pandemic because too many people have learned how nice it is to work from home.
That's true. And I think it is an opportunity though, as well, to promote the technical education in the US. But to your point, I'm not, well, I would say that the Inland Empire Economic Partnership, which I'm a board member on, and we had Paul Granillo, the CEO, speak at one of our webinars. They are doing things in the Inland Empire. It's just this small area, and I think that's Michelle's point, is that it's a local initiative, but we are absolutely focusing on it in this area, inland Southern California, and really it extends to all of Southern California because we realize that we have to have people retrained and have increased the technical skills because there was a study done by Brookings, and in this area, this is pre-pandemic, if in the next 10 years, 15 years or something like that, a lot of the jobs in the warehousing industry as well would be automated, and that would cause this like massive problem with unemployment if we didn't think about how we were going to train folks and reskill them, if you will. Now that whole equation has been accelerated. So what was going to happen in 10 years is like happening now. So you bring up a really good point. It's just that it's more of a local issue at this point, although, there's probably a future Harry Mosier out there somewhere that will work on it.
Right.
So yeah, no, Michelle, this has been really informative and helpful. We really appreciate you being here with us. And please check out Michelle's blogs and her books. She's a wealth of information. She actually was on one of our panels many years ago. So Michelle, you're a manufacturing guru, and we really loved having you on our webinar series. And to stay tuned for our next webinar, which will be on June 11th, and it'll be with Ian Oxenvad, and he's going to talk about political risk and the global supply chain. It's going to be fascinating. I've heard him speak before, and he's going to talk about, as we're thinking about like redoing our supply chain, and the risks that Michelle was talking about in China were more financial quality and a few other areas. Like they have started to do some things environmentally, but they are nowhere near where we are. So that's that side of the risk. But there's a significant different political risk going on with China, as well as many other countries. So he's going to talk about that and what we should do as companies, like where should we go? What should we do? So it should be a really fascinating conversation. Please feel free to join us. We'll send out an announcement later today on that topic. So I hope you'll join us. Thank you very much, Michelle, for being here today. And
my
we'll
pleasure.
see you next time. Yeah,
My
thank
pleasure.
you.
Right.